Yeah, Harvey Daniel Duncan. Okay,
Harvey.
we're gonna hope this works. If it doesn't, say the V. But yeah, I'm just gonna pull it up here. Actually, I made a website and I think it'll be on there. If you search up 49thbattalion.com, and then
Hmm.
there should be a section for, I think it's legacies, and then down, if you go to memoirs, there's all these different memoirs, and I also included what company they were with. And so you should see a photo of him and that sort of thing, and then you should be able to
Okay.
download a PDF file or something like that. And it has all the pages relating to the 49th Battalion. And then I can also,
Legacies.
does it show up or?
Legacies. You said
Uh,
in legacies
yeah, and then
testimonials.
testimonies, exactly. And then go to memoirs.
Okay. Here we go.
And then if we scroll down a couple, yeah, eventually Harvey Daniel Duncan B Company. And then if you click discover, it
Yep.
should download that. And once again, I don't think that I can't remember if I included the his time with the Overseas Battalion, which would be when he first enlisted and that sort of thing. But I do have scans of those
Okay.
pages I could send to you, so that's no problem either. So, but yeah, it could be interesting
Awesome.
reading. What I'll do, I'll just share my
Yeah.
screen here, and then we can start going through the little PowerPoint. I'll just make sure this is looking good. And so it won't answer perhaps all your questions. It's just kind of like touching the
Yeah.
surface really. And
Sure.
the focus is just kind of on the battles he partook in. Yeah, show my screen anyway. There we go. So the first one, I don't know if you ever heard of Vimy Ridge. Does that ring a bell at all or no?
Yep.
And so for Canada,
Yeah.
it's often seen as the most kind of important battlefield of the First World War. Um, and for the veterans who fought there, it was because they spent a lot of time there, and also there was a big battle that took place in April 1917. That first day happened on Easter Monday, 9th of April. It's still the bloodiest day in Canadian military history. And in fact, your great uncle not only partook in that great assault that day and came out unscathed, but he had actually
No.
served on Vimy Ridge well before that. He was needed for a
Okay.
reinforcement draft because in 1916 there were a lot of bloody battles for the Canadians. At first, they were up near Ypres in Flanders, and there's going to be
Mhm.
a plethora of battles that happen, and they're always losing men. So there's more reinforcements, but the main one happens at a place called the Somme. So the Battle of the Somme was, I think, the bloodiest battle of the First World War still, and still to this day one of the
Yeah.
bloodiest in kind of human history. And so the 49th Battalion, the regiment he joins, when they first marched down to the Somme in early September 1916, they go down with about 700 guys. And by the end of it, a month later, they're down to about 200. And so, all that to be
Wow.
said, the whole unit totally shattered. The war is not
Yeah.
won. In fact, the whole battle, it was basically a distraction from something on further south, a big German drive to try and get the French out of the war, and the British and the Canadians, they were being used almost as a distraction to try and bring the German reserves up north. But it was a lot of blood, a lot of bloodshed. And so
Yeah.
after that, the Canadian Corps, so short on men, they send them up to a quiet sector, and it's at a place called Vimy Ridge. Now, if you go on Google Maps, you'll be able to find it just today. What's quite remarkable, it's been preserved. So after the war, the French left it as is. They said it's too many shells and that sort of thing. You can see, do you see the
Mhm.
moonscape, the potholes in the landscape, uh, on my screen here, and hopefully it shows up. Those are all shell holes,
Yeah.
and so with the millions and millions of shells that were fired in the First World War, 30% never exploded, and so the French said, okay, in this sector especially, we're just going to leave it as be. You know, you can also notice, and these are actually I kid you not, the actual sector that your great uncle served in, and so
Really.
these are the communication trenches. He would have come up from the rear area forward to the front line. You see, it gets a bit more zigzag in the front line.
Yeah.
That's in case the shell lands in. If you're around the corner and the shell lands around the other corner, you're safe. Same with if a
Mm.
German gets in with a machine gun and fires down, you're not all going to be wiped out. But if you notice, as we get closer and closer to where the front line was, the German front line's right here. This is the front line that your great uncle fought in.
Okay.
You see these massive craters?
Yeah.
And what these are mine craters. And so the front lines at Vimy Ridge were so close, and beneath it you had not only soil but chalk, which was perfect for digging tunnels underneath. Both sides engaged in tunnel warfare. And so one of the things your great uncle would have been experiencing was when he's holding the front line in the trenches and it's quiet enough you can kind of hear movement and that sort of thing. Beneath his feet, he's hearing, picks and shovels, German pioneers digging beneath the trench, about 50 feet below at times. And the fear wasn't when you heard it, but it was when you heard it one day, and then the next day you didn't hear it. And you can imagine why, because now they're packet full of explosives, and if you're going to be there when they blow it up, you can imagine what happened to the soldiers that were holding the trench there. The other thing that happens a lot is because the front lines are so close, you have something called trench raids. And now these raids are basically where instead of capturing the trench, you're going to breach into it, capture prisoners, do as much damage, and then get the heck out of there. They're gathering intelligence, because only a couple months later they're going to launch an attack, and to try and capture the whole sector. And the more intelligence, the more you knew about the enemy, the better. But anyway, all this sort of stuff is going on all the time. There's also, as we see, all the artillery fire. It's a really cold winter. You can tell this is snow. Normally in the north of France, the temperatures get down, this isn't Celsius, but, about freezing temperature. So about, 2 degrees, -2, that sort of thing. There have been tons of mud, and, you can imagine water going to lowest place. But that winter was exceptional. The temperatures in the trenches dropped to -25. So you can imagine, and I think the next slide here, you can actually see the same trenches preserved now with concrete, kind of what it looked like in that winter landscape. Now, if you're an infantry soldier like your great uncle, especially in that time, they're hard pressed for men. And usually you do this trench rotation, 1 week in the front line, 1 week in the support, and then 1 week in the rear. What's actually going to happen is they're going to spend about 2 or 3 weeks in the trenches out under the snow and rain and whatever you have it, and then a week out at rest, and then you're right back into it. So it's quite demanding. You can imagine the day-to-day life that your great uncle and your comrades lived. There were these huge rats, the size of cats. There was German trench mortars and rifle grenades, the threat of raids happening, and also the mine warfare. And at any moment, a shell could land right on you, and you're killed. And so you could just start to see the world he came from. Being a farmer in Alberta, doing this training, and becoming a soldier. But all of a sudden, it's right here at Vimy Ridge that he first comes into the line. And what a time to come into the line. It's quite something, right? I'm going quite quick and I'm covering quite a bit, but any questions so far? Am I making sense, or
absolutely. Yeah, this is shedding a lot more light on, because like I've researched and I've read a few books. Like I read so I know like broad strokes, right? But the detail, I don't have a lot of the details like you're giving, which is
to a certain extent, the experience of every infantryman in the First World War is the same generally. But like what we're discussing here, this is exactly what your great uncle went through. Now, as I mentioned, these are the trenches preserved today. And so if you ever, I don't know if you ever made it out to France, or if you have the interest to come out, but you can still walk these same trench lines. This is actually the German trench, the Canadians over there.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, and I don't think I mentioned to you, but in case you're interested, we're organizing, I'll get more into it at the end, but we're doing a battlefield tour next August, and it coincides with the unveiling of several memorials. We don't have any memorials out there. And the interesting part of it is it's the battlefield tour. It's only open to descendants like yourself. And so we actually have quite a few families from B Company who were also, their relative was there in 1917. And so, yeah, it's kind of neat to think you'd be going around to all these places. And it's not just the front lines, but also rear. But once again, I'll get into a bit more. But it's fantastic to walk this ground. And for instance, and once again, I'll get into it later. But, if you're coming on the trip, we'll actually go to the exact objective that your great uncle was trying to get to, and it's somewhere in the middle that he basically got probably buried alive by a shell, and he's still out in that field, and so it's quite amazing. So anyway, but once again, they're just holding the line here at Vimy. This is still February of 1917, January. He gets there in December, so it's about 3 months like that. What happens in March is the whole unit gets pulled out, and they go about 10 miles behind the front lines. and it's not for rest, but in fact preparation. And so they realized this is going to be enough hard nut to crack.
Hmm.
In 1915, so 2 years before, the French army tried to capture Vimy Ridge and another hill. Now they captured the other hill, but Vimy Ridge evaded them. In fact, 100,000 Frenchmen were killed, wounded, or missing trying to capture these two ridge lines. So
Yeah.
even by the time your great uncle gets there, there's still French bodies out there.
Yeah.
And once again, you can imagine the size of those rats, right, feasting on the bodies. Um,
Yeah.
and what they figured was, you can't just do a game of ants where you just send guys over the top and and wish for the best, right? You got to do something a bit more substantial. And so they're taking the training very seriously. They make models of these trenches. They also go over the tapes, so they're practicing. Okay, once you get in the trench, how where do you go next? A lot of preparation with artillery too. They're going to do something called a creeping barrage,
Hmm.
which means, if you see my cursor, can you see my cursor here?
I can, yeah.
Yeah, so you see this little crater line, but we're just on the front line trench, so this is gonna get pounded for 3 minutes, and then 3 minutes later the front line's gonna lift to kind of where these trees are, let's say. And so making sure the infantry know what pace to advance at.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's one of those things. The 49th Battalion has an interesting role here. You can see, these are just the different formations that you have. Doesn't really matter. The main thing is to notice that, in this brigade of 4 battalions, each battalion about
Hmm.
800 guys, it's a regiment. Um, the 49th Battalion is in the rear. And why is that? One of the important things they realize is, okay, once these guys move forward, they have to follow that time schedule. And so there might be
Hmm.
some stuff left over, maybe a German with a machine gun in a dugout. And what had happened previously in the war, not with the Canadians, but with other British units, is, for instance, there's this one unit that, advanced, everything was going well, but they had missed this one machine gun, and all of a sudden started opening up in the back of them, and they lost over
Hmm.
90% of their guys, just like
Jeez.
that, right? And
Oh,
so the 49th Battalion had this important role where they were basically auxiliary troops. Some of their guys are going to be attached to different these battalions just to go over and give them a bit more manpower. Others are going to be bringing up ammunition, stretchers, water, everything you need. But they're going to have this critical role just to help with mopping up, is what it's called. And
okay.
also, what they do, and once again, we can visit it today. If you come to Vimy Ridge, they were all in these subways. And so the Canadian Corps, they wanted to get this element of surprise. The Germans knew an offensive was coming, but when? Usually you could send a plane up and they'll see all these troops, and okay, the
Hmm.
attack's about to happen. But they dug all these underground subways about 20 feet deep, 25 feet deep, and they held thousands
Okay.
and thousands of men there. So just an hour before the attack, at about 4:30, they started coming out, manning the trenches, and then an hour later, now you have that creeping barrage started. They're pounding everything. They're also
Okay.
hitting the artillery guns in the back, and all that to be said, it's a huge success. Your great uncle would have been working tirelessly back and forth between these trenches, perhaps bringing in wounded, helping up. He was very
Hmm.
much in the firing line, and by 11 a.m. they reached the objective, and they're holding on against counterattacks. And
Okay.
so that's his first battle. He arrived in the trenches about 5 months before. Now he went
Okay.
over the top. He survived the bloodiest day in Canadian military history. Huge success. And now they're getting this, feeling like now we're veterans, right? But of course, the
Hmm.
war's not done. So they had moved from here to there, and Berlin's still a heck of a long way to go, right? So,
Yeah.
but it was a big victory. And once again, as I mentioned earlier, the French army tried to do it, and they lost all those guys, and they couldn't, but the Canadian Corps could, and so they were quite proud about that. So this became a defining moment, and still to this day, like if you meet a Canadian, they'll know about Vimy Ridge, or they would have heard of Vimy Ridge, and
That's cool.
yeah, and what I love too is like a lot of Canadians now, they don't have a family connection to it. Um, but
Hmm.
of course, you being an American, you actually do. So, you're almost more
It's
connected to
it's
this
funny how.
battlefield than a lot. Yeah, it is. But once again,
Yeah.
so many. There were, I think, over 10,000 Americans that served in Canadian uniform, which is huge. Um,
Yeah.
it really it's quite a lot, right? So, but I guess it's similar. I think there were quite a few Canadians during the Vietnam War as well, but it's that whole volunteer thing, right? So. Anyway,
Yeah.
but if we were to look kind of from a bird's eye view, you have Vimy Ridge right here, right? So there's the monument. You got all the names, and in fact, the name of your great uncle is inscribed on that little white memorial, and there's over 10,000,
Wow.
actually over 11,000 names of Canadian soldiers that just went missing in France, right? So once they
Yeah.
smash through there and they get through that German line, this ridge line, and I don't have any photos, but it's pretty high up. The Germans realize, okay, we got to pull back about a mile, or else
Hmm.
they're, basically it's untenable to hold that position. It wouldn't be suitable. And they already had dug this other defensive line back here, kind of the approaches of what is now Lens, which is a city in northern France. It's a really coal mining area. In fact, if you see,
Okay.
do you see right here where my cursor is? Now
Yeah.
that's a focal feature of area today. It was a much smaller mine, but throughout this whole landscape, you have all these chalk mines, and you also have slag heaps and that sort of thing. So it's a really industrial part of France. And the Germans
Okay.
embed themselves right there, and that's kind of where they hold off the Canadians. Now, the objective for the 49th Battalion and all the other Canadians was just to keep the Germans busy. About 60 miles
Hmm.
north, you have Flanders, and the British are just about to launch this. It's called the Battle of Passchendaele, and that's going to be their big drive and try and get a breakthrough through there. But as I mentioned before, one of the tactics in the First World War, the strategic points, you got to keep the Germans occupied. You don't want to send all your reinforcements, all your reserves, to where the battle is. And so the Canadians were once more going to be used kind of as a distraction. And the way they're going to distract it wasn't through breaking through the German line or anything, but it goes back to what I said earlier with those trench raids, right? So they're going to go into the
Hmm.
trench, do as much damage, and then pull back. And
Okay.
as I imagine you might know from your research, in June of 1917, a similar raid to that was planned right here on this sector of the German line. Now, they did a
Okay.
similar thing to Vimy Ridge, where before the battle, they actually went out to a place called Villers-aux-Bois, which is about 6 miles behind the line. They did a bunch of training. They went over the tapes. Everyone would know their objective. But eventually, when they got there, and it was going to be a midnight raid, so the 0 hour when they were going to go over the top was I think it was 11:45. Um,
Okay.
and so, really late at night in June of 1917, it started to rain. So it was just hard to even see. Apparently, according to a lot of first-hand testimony, if you stuck your hand out right now, you can actually see it during that raid. And
Wow.
but at least their training was good and that sort of thing. Uh, what's going to happen? You can see the battlefield today, or I guess back then.
Hmm.
These are numerous aerial images that were actually distributed to the intelligence officer of the 49th Battalion in preparation for the attack. Uh,
Okay.
the main thing to notice is, well, simply you just have the trench lines, right? So the Canadian jumping off line is more or less at the bottom here. And you're going to have one line,
Okay.
some communication trenches, and this is going to be the final objective right up here. In fact, for your great uncle, he would have been doing a lot of training to figure out, basically, you would know this strip of trench line inside and out, right where you see my blue cursor between this communication trench and this area.
Okay.
That's his objective. We can see I got
That's
this
B. You said B company's objective.
B company's objective exactly. On their left flank, you can
Wow.
see some structures here, some buildings. Now you're
Hmm.
going to have another unit from Montreal attacking here. Unfortunately, they don't capture these structures, so they're going to get pounded by machine guns coming in the side. But it's quite chaotic battlefield because you can't really see more than a couple feet in front of you. But for him, basically,
Yeah.
what's going to happen, if you see this map right here, shows you the different
Hmm.
units. The left boundary, so this is the Montrealers are going to go there. 49th is right here, and you're going to have
Okay.
another regiment there. So this is just the 49th battlefield. In this space, you're going to have about 600 soldiers going from the jumping off line to the final objective. They're going to distribute it differently, right? So what they're finding is, instead of sending the guys all the way to the final objective, we're going to send half the unit to go capture the first objective, and then the second half to capture
Okay.
the final objective. So how you would have had it laid out would you'd have DNC, and then in the front line, who are going to go capture the first objective. Those are the companies, and then further behind, you're
Hmm.
going to have A on the left and then B on the right. Once again, your great uncle's B
Okay.
company. And so when the attack is launched, they're going to start moving forward, bayonets fixed, helmets ready. They're moving into the fire line, and they're going to try and push through. There's obstacles facing them, not only German resistance, but can you see these X's right here?
I can. Yeah.
Yeah, and you get them back here. They're always right in front of the trench. Any idea what that's going to represent?
Would that be barbed wire,
Dead on,
or would
exactly.
that be
right? So
Is it?
that's yeah, and sometimes the problem is they don't actually know where all the machine guns are. You know where some of them are, but not the
Okay.
majority. And that's just going to come down to the
That
guy.
makes, yeah.
But yeah, so barbed wire, like imagine just trying to get through all that, and you can see there's multiple belts here. That's where the artillery
Yeah.
comes into play. So much like with Vimy, they're going to use
Okay.
artillery to help lead them forward. Um, but unfortunately, sometimes the guns actually fall short. So when the guys start advancing, sometimes they're getting hit by their own shells. But once again, it's
Mm.
quite chaotic. You don't really know what's going on except a couple of feet in front of you. But they know their objective. What's going to happen is I think I got a first-hand account guy from a guy named Kenny Kennard, who was an officer there, and I'm just going to read it out, right? So he's part of the first wave. Your great uncle's going to be following behind this, but this is kind of the to set the scene. So 0 hours 23 hours. The jumping off trench, a mere furrow. The night pitch black and raining to beat the band. Tiny Boyle, Jim Mead, and myself, which were all officers, left the trench at the same point, and the last I ever saw of them was disappearing into the smoke as we began our mopping up. For some particular reason, all Fritzies and our own artillery seemed to concentrate upon our little sector, with the result that the front line was so obliterated that it was impossible to follow the original line. The brick line tunnel must have been completely demolished, as we were unable to locate it or any sign of the entrance. One dugout was also destroyed. Um, at the tops only of both entrances being located. So once again, artillery, artillery,
Oh.
artillery. This is quite important because when we, especially for the missing that took place in Avion Raid, oftentimes what's happening
Mhm.
is these shells are landing so close to guys, they might be hit by the concussion, maybe died from that, but oftentimes they're actually getting
Mhm.
buried by the shells, and their guys can't actually see them being buried because they don't realize till too late. They can't see far enough ahead and that
Yeah.
sort of thing, and so much noise, so much chaos. And if you can actually see your guy getting buried, odds are you probably got hit by the shrapnel or the blast as well, right? If you
Mm.
just try and put yourself in the shoes, hard to imagine, right? So if we go back to this
Yeah.
this overall map, because this is kind of the point of this talk is more, where is your great uncle? We know that D and
Mhm.
C company, they had captured the first objective. They're pushing through. A company is going to move up on the left. They're going towards where this post is now, and they're going to capture all the way up to Agent Trench until that junction point. Between this junction point and the road, and once again, the road, that's the marker between this Highland unit that's also advancing. This is where B Company
Okay.
is going. What I'm going to
Got
do
it.
for you is I actually recorded last August, I went to Ottawa, and there were a bunch of interviews captured in the 1960s by the Canadian Broadcasting Company of these veterans. One of them, named Roberts,
Right.
he ended up as an officer, but at that time he was a sergeant, and he actually discussed the battle in that interview. So I'll just play it for you now. Hopefully you can hear,
Awesome.
because this is the voice you're hearing is from a guy that was actually there that night, and he
Yeah.
was nearly killed. He was wounded there. And by the way, this is what it looks like today, right? So it's quite different, but you can see right there. Anyway,
Oh.
let me just try and pull it up here.
Yeah,
Uh,
sure.
yeah, let me know if you hear it.
You so then in
Okay.
June you went
Can you
to
hear it?
you were in the
Yep, I can.
the
Yeah.
Avion
Excellent.
area
So
there.
we'll just listen to
We had
this.
a raid, a midnight raid on Lac Talot, I think, the village of Lac Talot. Um, I remember how it went. I didn't have an officer in those days. They I was the only platoon that didn't have an officer. And Major Bradman used to send for me about
That's the company
3
commander.
times in the day and
Your great
about a
uncle's
dozen
company
times at
commander.
night, preparing for this raid at Vimy. And every time I'd go down, they'd say, Sergeant Roberts, you haven't got enough men for this particular job. You better take half of 7 platoon. And then he gave me a machine gun outfit from 7 platoon. So I had my own platoon, and I had 6 MacDonalds in the, and my runner he was MacDonald. And
I'm just noticing now, basically, from what I inferred from that, just knowing kind of the battle layout, he's in command, this sergeant, of half of the B Company
Yeah.
force that's going into the attack, because they're going to leave some guys back here as well.
Okay.
So, literally a 50-50 chance of this guy being the commander in that final battle for your great
Right.
uncle. Like you would have been this commander, which
Wow.
is incredible, right?
We
That's
went
awesome.
over the top at 12 o'clock, 11:30, midnight. And my particular job was to, after we'd reached our objective, I was to go out along the communication trench 100 yards or more in front, you see.
Oh,
And I was to stay there until the withdrawal, half an hour after the withdrawal. And I got to this trench and I was standing there contemplating, taking in the
guess it would be
different
this one.
landmarks, you see, midnight. But a shell landed right alongside of me. Well, it's like the kick from a mule, the closer you get to it, why, the less harm it does. But it just threw me and my runner flat on the ground. I had a whole lot of splinters down my side and in my face, head. Just tiny little slivers, But it killed 2 or 3 men about 30 yards away. And when I went up this trench and looked around, I went around, I found Sergeant Alexander, 5th Platoon. I said, it was about the time for the withdrawal then, you see. And I said, where are all the officers? Oh, he says, I'm damned if I know. Well, I said, it's time to withdraw, and I can't find the officers, so you better beat it back. So they beat it back, and it was some months later. I was at a rest camp at Boulogne, and I was called over to a marquee, and there was some gentlemen there in kind of civilian uniform. And they had great big volumes there, and asked me what battalion I was. So they looked over and through this volume, and found, oh yes, they were, they mentioned these MacDonalds, 4 of them. Said, do you know anything about them? Well, I said, the only thing I know about them was that they were in my outfit. I was in charge of them when we went over the top, and they disappeared completely. They must have been buried by shells. I had quite a few casualties that night. And I went out to dressing station, and
So it's quite incredible, right? Like that was one of the commanders, and you
Yeah.
saw it firsthand. So there's a couple of things to unpack there. The first, I presume the communication trench he's referring to is this one. I don't see any others that he could be possibly talking about. And once again, it was so
Okay.
chaotic that even though this is kind of their objective here, you could easily see, no plan survives the test of battle, right? That sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so when they're, for instance, these guys who first take the first objective up here, they have time to kind of consolidate and bring back their casualties. Whereas a big problem for these guys, A company over here and then B company over here, if they had casualties over there, it took them extra long to get there. And then eventually, after 90 minutes from the start of the battle, so really kind of 60 minutes for them, the flares are going to go up, signaling that they have to withdraw. Because if they don't withdraw from there, guess what's going to happen? This whole place, they're going to let the Germans come in and they're going to smash it with the artillery. And so you don't want to be in there. Now, you can imagine what, like if, let's say, your great uncle's body was partially buried by a shell, all of a sudden now the ground's getting tossed over and all that sort of thing. Pretty soon he's gone, right? Just like that, and vanishes. There were 3 cases of long after the war bodies from the 49th Battalion from this raid being found. Most famously in 2003, when from A company, so guys right up here, they actually found 2 bodies of, they could tell they were Edmonton Regiment by the insignia, but little else. And what was later, and they were later able to identify through amazing science, really, who they were, and through the process of elimination. And they were found to be a guy named Herbert Peterson and Thomas Lawless. For Lawless, it was quite fascinating how they were able to identify him. You remember how you went through your great uncle's service file and it said kind of where he was born and that sort of thing? Well, they knew where all these guys were born, and it came down to the skeleton's teeth And what they found was the way it corroded when it touched water or air. I forget how it goes exactly. It would corrode in a different way depending on where you are in the world. And so through that, they're able to tell that exactly right. Like it's just unreal. So they're able to tell that soldier grew up in Ireland and then later ranched in southern Alberta, or lived in southern Alberta rather. And when they looked at the list of the missing, there was only one that matched up with that. So it's one of those things where they're still, kind of uncovering the other things. The other one was I'd mentioned before that like if you look at the battlefield, like the final objective right up here where my cursor is, this is more or less the field where your great uncle went. So initially I thought it was over here. That's why I told you a motorway passes right over it. But it's good that it's over here because it means that there's still a chance he might be found, or approximately. Those guys were found in 2003 there. There was another guy called Corporal Dunning who was found in 1954, I think, right over here when they were digging out the mine. And still to this day they're plowing that field, right? So you just never know. The other interesting thing, if you remember from that interview I listened to, he talked about after he got wounded, he went to like the Channel Port, a place called Boulogne, and right before getting sent to England, big hospital there. And he talked about those civilians with those big volumes and that sort of thing. Did you catch that in the interview?
I did. I wasn't really sure what that was meaning.
And it's so interesting. I've only heard it in that one instance in all the interviews I've listened to. Those people, those civilians, are called the searchers, and so they are actually looking to piece together the clues for the families back home of what happened to these missing soldiers. So he might have forgotten, but they might have been asking about your relative as well. Trying to query and trying to understand what happened. But once again, I at least believe that he's still somewhere out here in this field. What I got, it's taken a couple of years ago, but I recorded a video showing the kind of battlefield, and I point out over there and that sort of thing, taken right about here. I think it was February 2022. Okay. And I'll play that for you so you get kind of like a virtual experience of, what it was, what it's like over there, right? So, here, let me just play it here. So those are the buildings. Let me just pull it up, like if I get the map, just to kind of help orientate you, right? So those are those buildings up there. I'm recording it from there, looking up. Okay. And you can kind of see the motorway on the right, right over here. And then once again, this is, the difference, right? So, I guess that track actually exists in the war. Do you see that there? The little farmer track here? I'm just noticing that. Yeah. You see that? Kind of cool. Oh, yeah. Interesting, hey? So, anyway, I'll play it for you right now. I'm standing here at what was Adult Trench during the Avion Raid on the night of the 8th to 9th of June, 1917. The final objective for the 49th Battalion was right in front of the houses there. And on the right was the 42nd Battalion, and beyond that, beyond the road with the cars going past was the RCR. Today, a quarry takes up the first objective and much of the jumping off line position, so you can't really see the battlefield today. That's all sectioned off and totally destroyed, but you can see part of the original battlefield. So if I just stop it here, if you remember what I said that like when we're looking at this map, and if we kind of look at this B company segment from here to there, now it's more or less here to there, right? So what we're seeing right now, this field right here, it's more or less somewhere here that shell explosion happened. Once again, presuming he got buried by a shell, he's still somewhere here. Fascinatingly, a couple of years ago, and you can see the trenches are all filled in, right? This is why they're fighting for the war for the places to go back to normal and the war to end. And so France refilled all the trenches. If you went on Google Maps to this exact field, only I think it was 2 years ago, you could actually see the outline of the trench. I'll send you a photo later. Really? It's really quite fascinating. I don't know if I have a copy handy, and they changed Google Maps since, but just through the aerial, so that the trenches are still very much there. If you also get some of the chalk underneath, I think I mentioned before with them digging underground and that sort of thing. But you can imagine with chalk in the war, it got churned up in such heavy droves where the trenches were, right? Because they're digging up, throwing it over their backs and that sort of thing. That, this is wintertime, but if we were to go back in, say, January when there's no crops or nothing in the field, you can actually still trace where those trenches were. which is,
Really? Wow,
yeah,
that
it's
is
quite an amazing
that's
thing, right?
crazy.
So it's totally a random part of France now, and it's hard to imagine that this is the battlefield. But at
Yeah,
least for your great uncle, this is kind of where the end was, right?
yeah.
So even though he's missing, just through kind of the research that one could do through the battalion records and kind of what's left, it seems very likely that he's, you're kind of looking at his resting place, right? And it's on the
Yeah.
battlefield. Now, the flip side of it, too, is after the war, and I kind of referenced this earlier, but it was heavily done in the 1920s and 30s. They're going around the battlefield looking for these bodies and burying them in cemeteries. Now, when they're
Mhm.
doing that, they don't have all the handy DNA technology that we have
Yeah.
nowadays. And so they basically do it through process elimination through what's on their uniform, right? So,
Mhm.
but your great uncle being a private, he's not the only private to die from that regiment that day and be missing.
Yeah.
There's a chance that he's in the cemeteries as well. Usually
Okay.
it's kind of like a 50-50 sort of thing.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but it's one of those things, right? So we don't know for sure, but
Mhm.
yeah, incredible. Oh, hey, so the
That
other thing
is
which
awesome.
I noticed, yeah, so you can find this is, oh yeah, and the last thing I
Mhm.
wanted to mention too was this, like even though there was a battle there in June 1917, there was still fighting there later on. Like this is a map from 1918, and that same
Okay.
trench that you can see that it was his objective. It's later being occupied by some like number 3 platoon of, I think this is
Mhm.
49th, in the spring of 1918, right? So
Okay.
odds are, and initially I thought he died in Adept Trench, like I told you in the message, but odds are if he died in that trench, they're digging out that trench all the time. It
Yeah.
doesn't seem likely, like if it was still being used for months after, that he
Okay.
was lying there somewhere in the trench. He would have been buried and that sort of thing. It's likely
Yeah.
once again he was just behind. So, and you can see this
Okay.
is his name inscribed on the Vimy Memorial to the Missing.
Yeah.
And I noticed too when I was going through his service file that he used to live in a place called Sedgewick, and I passed
Mhm.
through there a couple of years ago, and they have a war memorial there. And so notice his name is S.J. Slye,
Mhm.
and this was made I think in 1922 or whatever. And you can actually see there's two captured German machine guns, one here and one
Oh
on the other.
wow.
And you see in memory of those of this the men of this district who gave their lives. And his name doesn't really show up, but if you see on the top there's an H Sly,
I
and
do.
yeah, it's possible that this is 7 years later and he was homesteading most likely. So they might have known him as Harold, or, and they didn't know if there was E at
Yeah.
the end. I'm not 100% sure on that one, but
Mm.
it's interesting that I'd presume that's your family name,
Interesting. Yeah.
assuming they did a typo. And so you're actually commemorated in Sedgwick. And so this whole war memorial, all the rocks and everything was actually made by the veterans after the war. So but yeah, quite amazing. So all that to be said, even though he's missing today, he's commemorated not only in France officially on the Canadian National Memorial to the Missing, but then also actually all the way back in kind of rural Alberta where he left to go fight,
Wow.
right? So yeah, but
That's
quite amazing. So yeah, it is
that's
quite something.
awesome.
So yeah, but anyway, the and in case you were interested to join us, I'll send it through to you.
Yeah.
We're organizing. I mentioned that battlefield tour, and so basically it's going to go all throughout. Here, I can turn off my. Where are we right now? I can turn off the me sharing screen. There we go. But yeah, basically the whole idea is it'll be about 11 days, and so just
Okay.
it's going throughout France, but it's going all the different places that the battalion fought, and then as I mentioned, we're looking for relatives to come out and then be there for when we unveil the memorials and that sort of thing. So
Mhm.
I can definitely keep you in the loop as we're still working on pricing and that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
and
That would be cool. Yeah.
alternatively too, if you'd prefer, because it's an 11-day bus tour, and
Mhm.
totally up to you and that sort of thing. But generally the ages will be a bit more senior, that sort of
I
thing.
gotcha.
But if you want to come out on your own, for instance, and we just spend a day to actually come out on the battlefield, I'm normally in France between April and kind of the end of August, and
Okay.
so that's always a possibility, right? And so we just get to the nitty gritty, follow the actual places he was. Not only the battlefield's changed a lot, but the rear villages where he would have spent some times resting and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
The buildings are still there, right? And so that's quite
That's cool.
incredible. So you'll literally be looking at the same bricks that he was looking at, walking in his footsteps, that sort of thing. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, just shoot me a message if that's maybe of interest to you.
Yeah.
In fact, I just got back 2 days ago with doing a similar tour to Avion and that sort of thing with in a
Yeah.
similar case, and he was the guy was from Tacoma, Washington, and
Okay.
left to go join the Canadians and ended up with the battalion and that sort of thing. So, so once again, he's not
That's
the
so
only
cool.
American serving, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, so it's incredible, right? But anyway, I hope that at least I mean, do you have any questions from there or
I
anything like
don't
that?
think so. Actually, this was very helpful because, like I had mentioned, it's it's one thing to like I have like a service file and I was
Yeah,
going through it and I was trying to piece some of that together and
yeah.
it just the details to have everything more fleshed out
Totally, it's that kind of. It's
is
basically just
a
deciphering the
big help.
file, right? That's all it
Yeah.
is. So yeah, because but at least that survived. I mean, if he had gone and served with the British Army, for instance, in 1940 at the London Blitz, and it was
Hmm.
London they were storing all this files. So most of them have been destroyed. So
Yeah.
luckily it was a Canadian. You can get that piece of information, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
quite remarkable. So anyway, but yeah, thank you for taking the time. Thank you for answering my message.
Oh,
Uh,
thank you. No,
yeah.
I gotta thank you.
No,
This was
my
a
pleasure, right?
huge favor to me.
And the good thing too is one thing I'm connected with is in fact one of the ladies who does it, her relative was with the 49th Battalion as well, but they do I forget what you probably call it, the casualty identification program.
Mhm.
And so in the case that they might find a body from the 49th Battalion, they're trying to find DNA or whatever,
Yeah.
um, they sometimes come to me just to, I just meet these families and that sort of thing. So hopefully
Sure.
one day, in case they find another one near
Yeah.
Avion, you might hear from me again like that. So
Oh, I
and that would be awesome. That would be wicked if
anytime.
yeah, that'd be wicked, right? So hopefully, but
Mm.
anyway, but it's hopefully it gave you some sort of little bit of closure. I know
Yeah.
you wouldn't have known the guy or anything like that, but I imagine for his
Yeah,
wife
but
and kid and
still,
yeah,
I've been so because I for whatever reason this guy's just resonated with me. Just as I'm just fascinated by his story.
yeah. Well,
Um,
seriously,
and
consider coming out because it's
yeah,
one of those once in a lifetime sort of things. Um,
I would love to come out. That would be really really cool.
yeah,
I think. So,
I do it sort of semi professionally in the summertime. It's like my summer job. But
okay.
then for 49th Battalion families, I don't charge. It's that sort of thing. If you just pick up the
Oh,
meals
that's
and rent the car and that sort of thing, and then and
yeah.
yeah, we'll just go around and it'll be a lot of fun. And once again, I think
That
we
would
can
be
do it in
cool.
a day, or if you want to see a bit more, we can do it 2 days,
Yeah,
and it totally gives you another perspective. You think
that
you've
would be
seen quite a bit in this little hour, but in fact, when you
yeah.
get out there and start walking the footsteps, and it's incredible, right? So
That would be awesome.
yeah.
That would be really cool.
Awesome. Well, hey, Ryan, it's been
So,
a pleasure. So, what I'll do
thank
too
you so
is,
much.
if it's okay with you, assuming I properly record this, I'll upload it onto YouTube, and then you can have
Okay.
that record, and then you can share it with any of your family or anything that might want to know
Yeah,
more about the story. So then, once again, hopefully I recorded it properly, but then you can kind of go back and I'll
that would be
also.
awesome.
And you remind me in case I miss anything, but I'll also send you through the presentation I sent so you have that kind of record.
That would be
And then
perfect. Yeah.
that photo, that's the photo, the little trench in case you wanted to see that at Avion.
Yeah.
And I can't remember, was there anything else I told you I was going to send or some of the photos
Um,
right from the memoir. Yeah, I'll
yes.
put that
Yeah.
in Google Drive, right? So, and
That would be
in
awesome.
case I fall sleepy or whatever, just shoot me an email and I'll happy to help, right? So,
Yeah,
yeah.
that would be What time? Where are you at right now?
I'm in Belgium right now, and so
Oh, you're in
yeah.
Belgium. Holy
Do you
cow!
work night shifts or what?
I do. Yeah. So I
Yeah,
just
yeah.
got home from work.
There you go.
I'm a cop. So.
Oh, are you? Okay, yeah, there you go. So,
So.
service runs in the family. Yeah, because I was like,
Yeah.
gee, you finished work at that time? Yeah, so.
I did. Yeah. I
Yeah,
just finished work. I work tonight. Let's see. What day is today?
yeah,
Saturday.
Saturday.
Saturday morning. Saturday morning right now.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Right,
So
yeah,
I
it's
work.
confusing, right? You start Friday and then you end Saturday.
Yeah, so I have kind of a weird. I have like I do 10-hour shifts. So I worked 9 p.m. to 7 a.m.
Yeah,
today, and then I'll do the same tonight, and then I'll be off.
And
for-
are you Chicago? Are you Chicago PD or
No, not Chicago. I'm like a suburb out. I'm probably like half
Okay.
an hour west of, which is good. I don't want to work
Yeah.
there. Chicago's
Yeah,
nuts.
exactly. That's what I was gonna say, right? It's almost as bad as the Western Front, right? So,
Yeah,
at
right.
least from
Yeah,
what
no
I hear,
kidding.
right? So, anyway, Ryan, it's been great to chat, and yeah, but seriously, do consider and I think just personally, more so the doing that if you come out 1-to-1 or anyone else who's interested, especially
Yeah.
if the story resonates with you and kind of understanding that, because it's one thing to see it through a computer screen and another thing to get
Yeah.
out there and it's more accessible than you think. It's not too bad, but you never know, right?
That
So
would be really cool.
in case it works out, so
That would be awesome. Yeah. Thank you, dude. Thank you so much
hey,
for
my
everything.
pleasure.
This
Thank
has
you for
been-
what you do to keep the. I know I don't live there, but keep the community safe and that's
Yeah,
it's
oh,
important.
I appreciate
And
that.
someone's got to
Thank
work
you.
the graveyard shift, right? So
Somebody's gotta work.
fortunately, it's
It's
you,
me.
but say the vie, right? So yeah, awesome. Hey, take it easy, Ryan. And once again, if you have any other questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Always
Awesome.
happy to help and that sort of thing. So
Thank you so much. Yeah, I won't be a stranger, so I'll
Yeah.
reach out and I'll let you know a little bit more about next year because it would be something that'd be
Yeah.
very interested.
and we can always work it in. Sometimes I'm here in the winter, and then I'm actually at university soon. So once the plan is kind of once I finish with university, I'll be out in the battlefields full time sort of thing. So.
Awesome.
But then my main interest is 49th Battalion. So that's,
Yeah.
if you just said any other Canadian battalion, I might have not reached out, but specifically with the 49th, it's near and dear to my heart,
This-
right? So
That's so crazy how this worked out.
I know it all, yeah, works out perfect. Once again, thanks for answering my message.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for messaging.
Hey,
That's what I was-
yeah, no, it's amazing. You just got to put it out there, right? So power Reddit.
Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you. Thank you, man. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
my pleasure. Take it easy, Ryan. Have a good sleep.
You too. Thanks.
Bye bye.